Hey guys, so I missed a whole week of dropping a podcast episode for the first time ever since I started this podcast. And one of the things I always told myself was like, oh, I'll always have a podcast every single week because that's just what I'm going to do. I'm a weekly podcaster. And I've never taken like a break, even though I have seasons in the podcast app because I kind of have to do that. They make me do that on my platform that I have. But I just never took a break. Like even when I go on vacation, always prep ahead and then drop the episodes. Or if if Christmas time, I'll always record all the episodes and then drop them and then take a couple weeks off in December. But you wouldn't know that because I'm dropping the episodes every week. Well, because of Hurricane Helene, I was out of commission for a whole week, did not have power from Friday of the hurricane all the way till the following Saturday night. It came out on at 8 o'clock. And we were told we were originally going to get our electricity back on that first Friday. And then they said, never mind, you're going to get it back Monday or Tuesday of the following week. And our neighbor actually saw the power guys working down the road and called them over and said, can you please come? Like we were all on generators. And I mean, thank God nobody was hurt. But in our town in South Carolina, we're in the upstate of South Carolina. We're like 50 minutes away from Asheville, and Asheville got hit much harder. Hendersonville, North Carolina, all of them are North Carolina, got hit much harder than us. But every power line was down here. Trees were in the roads blocking us. We could not get out. They were telling us, stay home for a couple of days. We got to get emergency responders out. We had friends who had trees fall on their homes. And my husband and I, in the middle of the storm on early Friday morning, it woke us up because debris was hitting our roof. And we have a 2-story house, but our bedroom is the only part of the house that's a single story because it's kind of like off to the side. And at one point, he's like, we need to get out of this room because we live in the forest, literally in the forest. And even though we've cleared a lot of trees, when the house was getting built, the trees were still falling everywhere around us, but they were falling away from our house, thank God. But there were a few that we were so scared of falling on our bedroom. We have a lot of windows in our room. So he's like, there's really not a lot of support because if it falls on our room, the windows are just gonna crumble. And so I'm like, yeah, let's get out of here. So we went into the living room and I was just kind of laying on the couch, tired but very awake because the wind was just, there was gusts of wind because of the hurricane was supposed to downgrade by the time it hit us coming in from Florida and turn into more like a tropical storm. Well, that's what they usually do. And it didn't do that. It stayed like in a hurricane. It wasn't like a category 4 or anything, thank God, or things would have been completely demolished. I cannot imagine the category 4, category 5 hurricanes. I mean, even a category 3, I don't know what hit us. I'm assuming it was like a 1, but I mean, I don't know my weather and I didn't check into that. But we live next to the river. The river overflowed major. I've never seen it that full. I wouldn't say full. It took over land that it wasn't supposed to take over. My niece's trampoline is gone. We don't know what happened to it. My dad had moved equipment out of my brother's roping arena where he rides his horses the night before, and if he would not have done that, their truck, their horse trailers, their boat, the equipment that they have on this ranch, the tractor would have been in water or floated away because my brother's tack room where he keeps all of his horses, like the saddles and bridles, the tack room started to float away. That's how full the river was. So when I was laying on the couch early that Friday morning, just really nervous about everything, because I come from California where we have like earthquake scares and we grew up learning earthquake drills, but the earthquakes are very short and, they last for a few seconds and they're done. They do damage, but they're over quick. Never been into like stormy weather. I mean, when it would rain in California, we get our phones out like, oh my gosh, it's raining. And when there's thunder and lightning, you're like, oh my gosh, it's thunder and lightning. I mean, you are like, you're seeing a show, a light show in California when it's thunder and lightning. So here to get those storms, like I love the storms. I'm usually not scared of them at all, but hearing debris fall on the house and than seeing trees fall over. Like I literally just watched trees go down, and that was wild. So, needless to say, things are still getting cleaned up. I took my son to school today, opened up finally, but there were many, many detours. Sometimes my boys will take one route to work and they'll call me like, hey, I have to go around this one way. It would take an hour and a half sometimes to get home. I hit a limb sticking out of the road the other day. I was in my husband's truck because I didn't want to drive my car yet. It's a shorter, like compact car. So I was driving his truck to an event that I had to go to, and there is tree and debris being stacked up on the sides of the road, and a limb of a tree was hanging out, and I could not swerve. I couldn't slam on my brakes. I saw it too late. I had to hit it. I thought it was going to hit my windshield. It ended up knocking off his rear view, or the mirror on the side of the passenger seat. And I was like, oh man, he's going to kill me. But it's like, what do you do? There's stuff everywhere. And I'm just thankful that we're here and we're safe and all of my family's safe. We pulled together that entire week. We all had dinner at my parents, who had a whole house generator. So we'd go over there and shower. At the end of the week, I was like, I can't take it anymore. I have to wash clothes. I was just getting so inundated with that. But I survived a whole week without internet, a whole week without power. The world did not fall apart without my podcast. Sometimes it's just good reminders to know that you can take a break, even if it's not your own will to take the break, right? I mean, sometimes you just have to slow down and you have to handle the life that you're living. Like you have to stop and you have to say, today I'm going to run to the store, even though they're only accepting cash and there's a ton of people and the lines were super long because everybody's like, what do we need to get? What do we need to do? How are we going to survive off these generators and stuff? And you have to say, it's okay. We're in a community. We have to pull together right now. And when the church is saying, hey, we're driving to Asheville, everybody bring in whatever non-perishables you can. You don't worry about scripting a podcast episode. You don't worry about your YouTube video. You say all of that can wait, because this is real life with real people. And I want to join in the efforts to say, I am not the most comfortable, but that's okay, because there are people whose houses are floating down what is not, it's not even supposed to be a river there, but is now filled with water and flooded. And I've seen so much as you guys have heard about the destruction and stuff on the news, there's a lot of destruction. There's a lot of, families that don't have their homes, kids who's lost their parents. Like there's people unaccounted for still. This thing is going to take months to, if not years. Towns are gone. Um, and it's taking the American people to pull together. It's taking neighboring cities and states to come together and say, how do we help? Because as you can see, if you've heard that, FEMA is only giving out, they ran out of money because FEMA is supporting illegal immigrants, because that's what the government is, they're a government organization. So that's what they're doing. Is all of that correct? Yes, it is correct. And it's going to take people, citizens who love their neighbor, to say, let me help my neighbor, literal neighbors in my own country who are hurting right now. And it's been encouraging to see that. It's been encouraging to see what our church drove to the Asheville site last week. It's encouraging to see people with quads and Polarises, and they call them side by sides here, tractors and other equipment, say, I'm going to drive up there and I'm going to help and I'm going to do what I can and not wait. And that has just been really cool. It's been so neat. We've seen helicopters. I haven't seen them the last few days, but over the last week, helicopters were flying over, taking supplies and going to help rescue people. And so when you see that, you're like, wow, that's what America is all about. Like that is what I remember growing up when I was like, I think it was in the 80s when I was a kid, in the 90s when I was a teenager. And I was like, it reminds me of back then being so proud of like seeing the Americans come together and really support one another and being proud of your country. I'm always proud of our country. Like I love America. I'm an American girl. Like that's what I'm always going to say. I'm proud to be an American, but it brings that, like that overwhelming sensation of, wow, these people are rising to the occasion. And there are some cool people out there who are like, what do they need? We're going to help them get it. So keep praying for the people in the South, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee. Pray for Florida. It's hurricane season right now. I had a student the other night who's getting ready to evacuate with his family, and they had all the furniture up high because there was a category. They said we're hoping it downgrades to a category 4, but it looks like it's going to be a category 5. I think it's Hurricane Milton now this week. So it's just like by the time this podcast airs, I don't know what that destruction is going to look like. We need to pray for people because they're right there in the heart of these things. So, anyways, that was my quick little update. And just to say thanks for hanging in there, for understanding. I got a lot of messages from you guys just saying, hey, we're praying for you. I hope your family's doing well. Those messages are just very kind and very sweet. And I'm so thankful because sometimes I was like, I got messages from people that back home too, like in California, just saying, how are you guys doing? And they're seeing things like people shoot each other for gas or whatever. I'm like, no, no, we're good. There's nothing like that happening where we are. Or, oh, are you really paying this much for groceries? I'm like, no, we haven't experienced that. Like, I don't know where you're getting that information, but that's not true. Like, it's still nobody's price gouging. That is illegal. But sometimes, like, I'm surprised at who doesn't message and say, oh, are you guys doing okay? And then I'm surprised at who does. And it's funny because a lot of the people who did message and say, are you okay? Like, you're my listeners. We've never met in real life, but you take the time to send those messages. And I think that that's very sweet. And then sometimes people from my own hometown in California will be like, I'm like, oh man, you're paying attention. Like, thanks for reaching out. That's awesome. And then the people that you would think don't. And you're like, okay, like, where are you? But anyways, life happens sometimes, right? So people get busy, but it's been a quite a week and a half. And I know for other people, it's going to be longer than that. So we'll just keep praying. Today, we're talking about how Christians should vote. And this is, I promise you, my last episode on voting this election season. I've tried to have episodes that were informative and helpful as we gear up to vote in November. It's like a month away. And I made the case for why Christians ought to vote by refuting 4 of the main reasons Christians give for why they don't or won't vote. That was in episode 255. If you haven't listened, then just go back and listen to that. And I think I've also had Kathy Gibbons from Filter It Through a Brain Cell on the show to discuss how to think through voting this season. I really enjoyed that podcast episode because we ended up putting some examples up on the screen if you were watching by YouTube. And I think that that's helpful, especially in a teaching method, so you can see what we're talking about. Today, we're going to lay the policies out of each of the candidates, and we're going to choose the best one that aligns most closely to a biblical worldview. Before we get into all of that, I'm launching a brand new newsletter in the month of October. It's already sent out last week to those on my subscriber list only. So if you don't subscribe to my newsletter, then you won't get it. But if you do, it's called Worldview in 3 Minutes, where you get worldview information, how to identify worldviews in media, entertainment, and why we're all somebody's disciple. It will be short. It's only going to be like once a month, and it's only going to be 3 minutes long. So it's a quick read, but it gives you lots of information. If you want to learn more about worldview formation and the reason it's connected to discipleship, then go to shandafulbright.com, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you'll be able to subscribe. A few days ago, I was teaching my Train Your Brain middle school course, and one of my students asked, are biases and prejudices the same? I thought it was a great question, and we looked up the definition of each of those. And I told my students that I always look, up the definitions of words, even if I think I know what they mean. And prejudice means a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. And a bias is prejudice in favor of or against one thing, a person, or a group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. So technically, they're related, right? But we can be prejudiced because of our biases. This is related to everything that we do, including how we vote. For example, you can be biased towards a candidate because you belong to a specific party. So you might go in saying, well, I know I'm going to vote for her, or I know I'm going to vote for him because I belong to that party. We all have biases, and the best that you can do is be aware of them. You can't really just be like, I'm going to take that bias and toss it. I mean, you have to be aware of them so you can push through them to judge fairly. regardless of what you like or dislike. But if you're prejudiced, you've already made up your mind and nothing will sway you to change it because you're like, well, I already like that. I'm favoring that. And remember, prejudice is an unfair way. So, in other words, prejudice is favoritism, which is unfair, which biases can influences how we vote. But if you're honest and you are aware of your biases, you can overcome them. Do you see how they're related, but they don't have to be attached or always moving together? All that to say that we need to be honest and evaluate the policies of each candidate before we vote. And that's what we're going to do today. For this information, I went directly to the website of each candidate. So I'm not making any of this up, not pulling from interviews that I've seen. I went to the websites of each candidate. In some cases, I copy and pasted the information right into the show notes. And I'm going to leave the links to their websites, although it's pretty easy to find their websites, right? If you wanted to, but I'll leave the links in the show notes as well. Either way, I'm gonna let you know where to go find the information so you can go look for yourself, which I highly recommend. And I'll be honest, I didn't used to go and investigate like I do now. I used to just vote based on, my party because that's what I did. And I listened to interviews and I read articles, but I didn't go dig much deeper than that. As I've gotten older and I understand the importance of knowing what you believe and why, not just as far as religion is concerned, but truth in general, I've become more of a researcher. So also, I don't want to give false information to you or just give you an opinion related, podcast episode. You can go find those anywhere to just get somebody's opinion, but I don't want to do that. I want to be an honest podcaster and teacher who does my due diligence on these matters. So let's talk about the vice presidential debate really quick. The power was out. I had no Wi-Fi. My phone was glitching, but me and one of my boys was watching it together, and I did get a lot of to watch a lot of it. And I did read JD Vance's book Hillbilly Elegy. So I expected him to be a great debater. Like I knew something about him going into this, like his education, his background, the type of person that he is. He is a strong speaker and he has his convictions, right? So he's going to hold those strongly and he's going to be able to speak them articulately. He is highly educated and he lived a hard life with a mom who was an addict. She was addicted to opioids and he didn't have his father around. So he was basically raised by his hillbilly grandma and his grandparents. And he talks about them like hillbilly. I didn't really realize this was a culture before I read this book, to be honest with you. I grew up hearing the word you hillbilly, like people call each other a hillbilly, and it just meant, to me, I thought it was just this white country-ish type person who didn't have a lot of much of an education, and maybe that's true to some point, but I didn't realize they were a whole culture of people, I guess you could say. So to see him in action on the debate stage against Tim Walz was really something. Vance was articulate, he was quick, and he was to the point. He didn't avoid questions like many. He actually restated the question and said, to your question, and then he would answer it because he was very pointed. And that follows a formal debate style that we should, one, demand. We should really demand that as candidates, like prove your position eloquently, prove your position with reasons. We should demand that. And secondly, we should see this as a natural part of our political system. Like if we demand it, then we probably would see it as part of our political system. But as Kathy and I talked about it, we are not demanding it because we don't even know what is required of formal debate. So it makes politicians rise to a standard of like intellect and not to be like just BSers. That's for lack of a better expression. Okay. I don't ever say that word, but just try to pull the wool over your eyes. It's easy to see when someone is blowing smoke, but when you see a debate like the one we saw with Vance and Walz, it's easy to see what we're not getting from these people when they think a debate is name calling and one-liners. I do wish our two presidential candidates were smarter and more articulate. I wish that they were more, they held their convictions more strongly. Even if I don't agree with your stance, at least don't be wishy-washy, like speak it, stand by it, stay on topic. That would be nice. That would be really nice. But it's also up to us to demand that. And one way to do that is to know what they stand for. We have to know what they've said. We have to know what they've done. We don't have to get into the weeds on their policies, but we do need to know the basic facts of where they stand on certain issues. And that's why I went straight to the websites of the two candidates and will read you what they stand for. So on the economy, Harris's site says, quote, create an opportunity economy by fighting to bring taxes down for middle class families. She will expand the child tax of $6,000 to families with newborn children. Her campaign states that no one earning less than $400,000 a year will pay more in taxes. She is going to give first-time buyers with up to $25,000 help toward their down payments on a new home. She wants to help achieve this, she will expand the startup expense tax deduction for new businesses from 5,000 to 50,000 and take on the everyday obstacles and red tape that can make it harder to grow a small business. She will also go after quote unquote bad actors by calling for the first ever federal ban on corporate price gouging on food and groceries, which will build on the anti-price gouging statutes already in place in 37 states. She wants to lower the cost of healthcare, cap insulin, cap out-of-pocket spending. She will protect Medicare and Medicaid by making billionaires pay their fair share. Trump vows to lift restrictions on American energy production and terminate the Green New Deal. He wants to, quote, unleash American energy, end quote, to slash inflation and get the economy moving. He wants to slash wasteful government spending. He wants to reinstate his deregulation policies that said he saved American households $11,000 each. He doesn't want tax on tips, which Kamala Harris also had said that. And he wants to make the Trump tax cuts permanent. He wants to institute an America First policy and renegotiate failed agreements with other countries and stop those taking advantage of American consumers and prioritize American producers. In chapter 4 of Trump's campaign platform, yes, I said chapter 4, Trump's website is a complete book with chapters, and there's a lot of information. Kamala Harris's is much less information, much less. No chapters, doesn't look like a book. Actually, Kamala Harris didn't even have her information on a website up until not that long ago. So it's not as lengthy and as descriptive. Trump says that he, in addition to helping college students earn their four-year degree, his administration will create alternatives to traditional four-year degrees. And I'm assuming that's through trade schools and such, things like that, that don't just require you to have a college education, but you need trade schools. He will make healthcare affordable by increasing transparency and promoting competition so that costs will be competitive for consumers. He will reduce the regulatory burden and drive down the cost of living and prices of everyday goods and services. On immigration, Harris's website says this about immigration, quote, Vice President Harris and Governor Walz believe in tough, smart solutions to secure the border, keep communities safe, and reform our broken immigration system. She goes on to say, as vice president, she supported the bipartisan border security bill, the strongest reform in decades. The legislation would have deployed more detection technology to intercept fentanyl and other drugs and added 1,500 border security agents to protect our border. After Donald Trump killed the border deal for his political gain, she and President Biden took action on their own, and now border crossings are at the lowest level in 4 years. Their administration is seizing record amounts of fentanyl and secured funding for the most significant increase in border agents in 10 years. End quote. Okay, the problem with this is you can put it on your website, but there has to be evidence of it. She's made a lot of claims. You have to say, where is the evidence of that being true? Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Biden has been the president for 3.5 years. And the fact is, we have more illegal immigrants in this country now than ever before because of their policies. They're blaming it on Donald Trump, but Donald Trump hasn't been in office. He's not even in Congress. He's not in the Senate. He can't strike down a border deal. Now, did he maybe discourage some things from happening? Maybe, but he can't do anything. And why would he have done that? What was in the border bill to begin with? Those are things that are going to require you to go a little bit further. Okay. So I've said before, the problem with these claims is that she was put in charge of the border as the vice president of the country. If you see the replays of even the media itself coming out and saying she was the border czar. She was the border czar. She was the border czar. Now everybody's like, she's not, she wasn't the border czar. Well, you're on record as saying that. We have videos of you saying that. The Biden-Harris administration, they've signed executive orders for other things. Why not border security if you really want to, secure the border? They blame it on Trump, but he's not in office. They blame it on the Republicans, but this admin has been being deceptive about immigration itself. The border numbers are not at their lowest in 4 years, but even if they were, they've been in office for almost 4 years. So what does that tell you? And I keep saying this, but both of these candidates have been in office before. Donald Trump was the president for 4 years. Harris is the current vice president. I mean, we have not just what they say they're going to do, we have to look at what they've done. And I think that people are missing that. Like, you have to say to Kamala Harris, she's acting like she's a brand new candidate. You're not. Trump can say, look at my record, look at what happened during my presidency. And we can say, okay, yeah, that will give us an indication of what it would look like if he was president again. Look at her as VP. If she agrees with Biden and his policies, then we know what we can expect the next 4 years. Does she have no responsibility over the economy right now? Does she have no responsibility over the border right now? Does she have no say or influence as the vice president right now? These are questions that she has to answer, but no one is holding her to that. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. It has to be on you and I to think through these things. Trump's immigration policy is to secure the border and reverse the Biden admin's open border policy, is what he says on his website. Bring the largest deportation of immigrants ever. Of course, he'd have to say, since there have been millions of illegal immigrants allowed into the country, if he started to deport them, would it be the largest deportation ever? Yes, because of how many there are in the country. And they will enforce strict vetting, stop sanctuary cities, and make sure Americans are given job opportunities first. That's why you see in Ohio right now, all of the Haitian migrants over there, because they've declared it like a sanctuary city, but they're overtaking the cities of like Springfield, Ohio, and other parts of the country. So very, very important that we think about those things. As far as education, Trump is advocating for school choice. I think school choice is a good idea. I say this coming from a teacher and a parent. It makes schools and districts more competitive, making the standards for teacher quality higher. It puts control into the hands of the parents rather than keeping parents out of the loop and keeping parents within the certain district boundaries and saying you only have the option to go to that school. Parents can pull their kids from one school if they're not happy, rather than feel like they have to put them in the school that they're zoned in. Right now, the only choice is to get a district approval to change schools if you're in a certain district, or take your kid to a charter school and you have to apply to get in there, or pay the extra money for private school. Remember, homeschool parents and private school parents still pay taxes to their public education system, even though their kids don't attend. And maybe that's different in some states or some cities based upon the laws there. But where I came from in California, you still paid school taxes. And I did not find a plan for education on the Harris website. Harris's campaign slogan is a new way forward. Trump's is MAGA, make America great again. The irony in Harris's slogan is she's been the vice president for almost 4 years. All we do is get more of what we've already had. And even worse, because she's to the left of Biden. She is more liberal than Biden. Harris supports abortion and wants to codify Roe v. Wade into the Constitution. She just came out this week and said she wants to kill the filibuster, which would radically change the structure of the US government. That's radical. What they keep saying and repeating over and over and over again, and it is propaganda, is that democracy is at stake and that's why you have to vote for her, when they've literally went against they're the ones who are destroying democracy by saying no Democrat. If I was a Democrat, I would be mad right now because they took away my opportunity to put a candidate in that I actually would want. And they just put Kamala Harris in with absolutely no primary voting. They just said, oh, Biden's not going to do it anymore. Biden, you're out. Go ahead and Kamala, you can be in. And somebody finally asked her that on a news source this week. And of course, she didn't answer the question of why that was fair. It's not fair. That's not how our democracy is set up. And so when you can do that and say, but the other guy, our democracy is at stake because of Trump. Well, maybe our democracy is at stake because of you. Is our democracy at stake also when you threaten freedom of speech by saying you can't just go post on social media what you want to post, that we're going to fact check you and take things down? That we have to consider those things. Trump is responsible for putting conservative Supreme Court justices in place so that Roe v. Wade was pushed back to the states. That's what happened to Roe v. Wade. Instead of it being a federal law for everybody that abortion was legal in the United States, it went back to the states. It puts abortion into the hands of the voters. Trump already said he doesn't want to make abortion illegal, yet that is what the Harris campaign continues to claim. And the thing is that this is not a states' rights issue, it's a human rights issue. We ought to be looking at the human lives that are being killed every single day because people want to have autonomy over their bodies. Tim Walz, the running mate of Kamala Harris, is equally as radical as she is. He said he's more pro-choice than Nancy Pelosi. There have been at least 8 babies that were born alive during an abortion in his state, and they did not take life-saving measures to help those babies when they were born alive during an abortion. And he doesn't support that, and neither does Harris. Now, people have asked him about that. Somebody from Fox News asked him about that on an interview a few days ago, and he still denies that that is what his law says can happen. So Tim Walz created a hotline for people in his state to tell on their neighbors for having guests over their house during COVID. He supports transitioning kids, as does Harris. The ticket is as radical as it gets and more radical than anything we've ever had before. The Trump-Vance ticket is not pro-life because they want abortion at some point, or they're supporting abortion at some point. However, they are the least radical on abortion. So we have to wrap ourselves around that as Christians and say, I have 2 choices here. Which one gives me the closest starting point to the pro-life issue? And that's the Trump-Vance ticket. Okay. So again, abortion is at the state level. So you can do something about that in your own state. So let's look at foreign policy. Under Trump, we had peace in the Middle East. To be honest, I knew that that wasn't going to last. Okay. Because that's a never ending conflict over there. It's a biblical proportions. Really, it is. And that's just eventually there was going to be conflict again, because until Christ comes, there won't be peace in the Middle East or on earth at all, really, right? But in regards to the Middle East, and you know, Ukraine wasn't being attacked by Russia when Trump was the president. There was no threat of invasion of Taiwan by China. There was no attack on Israel by Iran, backed by Hamas, which just took place a couple weeks ago. Those are facts. Is that true? Yes, it is true. None of that was happening under Trump's administration. It's happened all within the last 3.5 years. And now Iran is bombing Israel after Biden told Iran, don't. That's it. He said, don't. And I mean, I guess it wasn't intimidating enough, because after Biden said, don't, Iran said, hold my beer, and they did. So now, again, Israel's being attacked by Iran. So this administration can say what they want to say, but this is all happening under them. Israel is a US ally. People will say, why are we supporting Israel? Because we're an ally. When you're an ally with a country, you band together to support each other and to protect each other. If America, God forbid, was at war on our soil, we want our allies to come and help us. So Israel is a US ally, and the Biden-Harris administration plays both sides, trying to appeal to the Hamas supporters on one hand, but say, oh, Israel has a right to defend themselves on the other. They talk out of both sides of their mouth. That is not strong leadership. You have to pick a side, because that is weak leadership. If you're going to be a heathen, just be a whole one. Be a whole heathen, okay? Don't be a half a heathen. No one respects that. I have more respect for someone who says, this is who I am, with no beating around the bush, than someone pretending to be one thing in front of one person and then something else in front of another. That doesn't, that doesn't work. When Harris didn't show up when Benjamin Netanyahu was here a few months ago, weak. She was visiting a sorority. We need strong leadership. She's weak, plain and simple. So is Biden, though. People are concerned about the economy, immigration, and parents are concerned about what's taking place in the public education system. Things have amped up in the last few years, and there is a lot more division and angst now than there ever has been. I don't know if a presidential election can diminish that, really. I've talked about this before, but politics are downstream from culture. There is a huge moral shift that has taken place in our country, and people vote their feelings because that's what happens in a postmodern culture. Unfortunately, the further away from the truth the culture gets, the more we will continue to use our feelings to be our guide. Those who hate Trump because he's orange or because of his rhetoric won't care about his policies. That's what we should be discussing in a candidate, their qualifications and their policies. But we don't even have a media that does that. If you want the truth, you have to know how to dig for it. You have to be diligent to find it for yourself. So let's talk about the evangelicals for Harris for a minute. I want to briefly discuss this group. There was an evangelicals for Biden back in 2020, and the same group is supporting Harris, and maybe that group has grown. I haven't checked into the numbers, but if you've read the book Shepherds for Sale by Megan Basham, you've heard how liberal politicians have made their way into the church because they need the votes of the Christian people. Outlets like Christianity Today are now left-leaning sources that promote things in conflict with a biblical worldview. If you want to learn more about that, I would read Shepherds for Sale by Basham. It is so good to know what to look for, and even some of the curriculum that these churches are buying and teaching their congregations, and they're telling them how they should vote and how they should think on things. I think that sometimes the liberal people, the people who support liberal ideas are more dogmatic than the conservatives. The conservatives kind of like lay down and, oh, it's okay, I'll be passive about this. And the liberals are like, bring me all the curriculum. I'm going to teach it to my congregation because I want them to support transgender issues and abortion. And that's what's taking place. A March 5th Newsweek article showed that Trump was losing the white evangelical vote while Biden was gaining more white evangelical voters. In September, which is last month, PBS published an article saying that some evangelicals are supporting Harris because they're, quote, tired of watching meanness and bigotry, end quote. According to the article, Reverend Lee Scott said, quote, I am tired of watching meanness, bigotry, and recreational cruelty by the worldly witness of our faith, end quote, Scott said on the call. He also added, quote, I want transformation, and transformation is risky business, end quote. That's some profound wording, isn't it? I mean, we know everything we need to know about a politician with that stuff, with those reasons. Now, notice here that there isn't one policy he states that he agrees with Kamala Harris on. And notice he doesn't mention any of the policies he disagrees with Trump on. It's all, he's mean. That's emotionalism. And I left the article link here for you. He goes on to say in the article, I don't agree with her. I'm pro-life. I don't agree with her on her stance of abortion, but I still don't like Trump. He's mean. Terrible, terrible thinking. What are the consequences if she becomes president and he is a pro-life pastor, because he's reverend, remember? And she codifies Roe v. Wade, where we're back to millions of babies being aborted. I mean, more babies were aborted from the time Roe v. Wade passed till the time that the Supreme Court put it back into the hands of the states, then died in World War I and World War II combined? Or was there another war in there? Think of that. More unborn babies died than those who died in the most deadly wars of the 20th century. And this pastor is going to be okay with that because Trump's mean. Get a grip, dude. Actually get a grip from out behind the pulpit and go sit your butt down because you shouldn't be there. That is absolutely insane to me. Terrible thinking. Your conviction is on whether or not a man is mean. What is meaner? A mean tweet that you can choose to read or not, or killing an unborn child? Which one's meaner? Because Kamala Harris is going to allow that to happen, and her running mate is going to allow it to happen, where a baby is who was they're trying to abort him. The goal was to abort him. They're going to leave him floundering on a table if he survives that abortion, and no one's going to come to help. No one's going to come to give comfort care. Is that compassion? Is that okay with you? Because to me, that's not only mean, it's evil. Evil. So we have to think as Christians. We have to think about what we're doing, and we have to give better reasons for why we stand behind the candidate that we stand behind. Dr. George Barna just sent an email regarding the number of Christians who will not vote in this election, and it's startling. He says, quote, 51% of people of faith are likely to vote in November, and the full 32 million Christians who regularly attend church probably won't vote. Apathy among Christian voters could be the deciding factor this election. Much of this civic apathy flows from inaction by our nation's churches, many of which avoid teaching on the key social issues that could guide people's votes or help them understand how the Bible speaks to these issues. Barely half of Christian churches, only 56%, bothered to take the simplest election-related activity, encouraging their people to vote. And in the past 2 years, only 61% of churches provided any sermons or teaching about the Bible's stand on key cultural issues. The topics they did address most frequently were religious freedom at 67% and poverty at 63%. Fewer than half of Christian churches taught about other social issues. Among regular churchgoers in the past 2 years, a minority recalled teachings on abortion, 49%, the issue of crime, law and order, and law enforcement, 45%, or same-sex marriage, 42%. The most common reason for deciding to not vote is a lack of interest in politics and elections, 68%. Further, about half of those surveyed say they dislike all of the major candidates at 57%, feel that none of the candidates reflect their most important views, 55%, believe that their one vote doesn't make a difference, 52%, that the election has become too controversial for their liking, 50%, that the election outcome will be rigged, 48%, or that they don't know enough about the candidates to choose one, 48%. What's being lost in all this is the responsibility of Christians to vote, the call to be salt and light so that biblical values are represented in the public square and to influence their government and nation with God's truth, end quote. I love George Barna's research. He keeps his finger not on the pulse of the culture so much as he keeps his finger on the pulse of the church. And it shows us that the church does not think well. The church has to understand what the Bible says, and out from there, from the mind that understands the word of God, from the heart that loves the Lord with all of their heart, and from a soul that is integrated into that mind body concept, we live it out, and it affects everything that we do. It goes out beyond us to how we treat our families, to how we live with our neighbors, to how we live within our community, and how we vote and how we make decisions. It's integrated. If we say, I'm not going to do that, we begin to compartmentalize our faith. Christians, we have a huge impact in this election. And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it now. We have a responsibility to vote because of where we live in America and the privilege that we have and the obligation we've been given to protect and defend that right. So policies versus party. I've said this in the last couple of episodes talking about the election. Was I like, yes, I get these two people. This is going to be a hard decision, man. They're great candidates. No, I've never said that. I think that we can do better. We can, but we're not going to do better this election season. So does that make me say, okay, don't vote because no, because this election season is going to happen regardless. It's going to happen. So is there a better candidate out of the two? Yeah, there is. There is a danger in only voting party rather than policy. While it's true that the two parties stand for different things and one is more conservative while the other is more liberal, it doesn't always, it wasn't always this way. I've heard from my husband's parents that their family used to be like Democrats because the Democratic Party used to stand for and back the middle class. That has flipped ever since I can remember. So although you may have voted for one party your entire life and you probably won't vote any other way because that's the way you guys have always voted, which, by the way, is an appeal to tradition, a fallacy, and it's not a good reason. You have to look at parties, or you have to look at policies, sorry, because parties change as the culture changes. Parties change as the culture changes. So you have to look at the policies. Have you seen the reels where people are getting interviewed and asked why they're voting for a particular candidate and they can't give you any reason based on policy? They can't give you one reason based on policy. It's all emotion. It's all emotion. If you're voting for Kamala because she's a woman, that's based on emotion. If you're voting for her because she'll be the first woman of color, it's all feel good, emotion-based reasoning. If you vote for Trump because he almost got shot It's emotion based. If you don't vote for Kamala because the sound of her voice is like a tortured cat's nails in a chemistry class chalkboard, those are all the annoying things. Again, emotionalism. If you don't vote for Trump because he said that one thing that one time that made you really mad, not a good reason. A good reason to vote for someone as a Christian is because their policies best align to a biblical worldview. And that is what is right for the American people because those policies will have better and more fair outcomes. When I drive around in my little neighborhood here, I see these little signs stuck in along the road and it says, vote the Bible. And so I was thinking the other day, I told my son, like, I don't really like that sign. It just says, vote the Bible. So you know, I think it requires more context. Although I do understand what they're talking about, I get it and I appreciate that. Really, I do. I think I appreciate that biblically based stance, like, hey, look at what the Bible says and vote that. But when it comes to pro life, not one ticket matches the Bible, but there is one not as fanatical, right? And that's the Trump Vance ticket. When it comes to immigration, the Bible talks about taking in those from other countries as refugees and helping them out, but it's referring to those who want to come in and dwell among the people and partake of that country's, like that culture that they're coming into. It's not about coming in and breaking the law and taking advantage of the people and getting all of their resources. So, does one party stand for that over the other? Yeah. That is more in line with the biblical worldview. Yes. Some in America are here because they love this country and they took the proper channels to become citizens. And then there are many here that don't want to do that. So when we say vote the Bible, we need to talk about the policies that these candidates are running on and what the biblical stance should be on those policies. So I think that hopefully that church, if that's a church putting that out there, which I'm assuming that it is, vote the Bible, hopefully they're talking to their congregants about what that means and talking about the issue Barna is saying that more than half the churches in the US are not discussing when it comes to this election. If you're a leader in the church, your members need help thinking through these issues. They really do. They need help talking about the policies and how to vote because they're hearing a lot of other things from a lot of quote unquote reverends, like the one on the PBS article, who's just saying Trump's mean, don't vote for him. Think of it as discipleship. They're going to need to be discipled like through even the policies because those policies do align to scripture in some way, or the Bible does inform us about how to think about those policies. So think about that as we lead up to the election. Okay. So when we say vote the Bible, we need to talk about the policies that these candidates are running on and what that biblical stance should be. And I believe the church should be talking about these things much more, as Barna said that they should. So, as I said, this is my last episode on the election and how to vote. The rest is up to you, right? We each get to vote. We get one-time vote this year. But in order to have a well-informed voter, in order for us to be well-informed, don't take anyone's word for it. Don't jump on a bandwagon and vote because they're all doing that. Don't, take a stance because everybody else says you should take that stance. Those are fallacies. They're fallacies in logic. They're not good reasons. Do the work yourself and come to an informed decision. Check out the candidates, the policies, the propositions, and be ready to step into that ballot box with confidence. Your vote does count. It really does. Look at what Barna said. If all of these Christians don't vote, it could determine the election. Them voting could determine one direction, them not voting can determine another. Politics matter because they're going to affect the way that it's going to have an effect on our lives. Elections do have consequences, as we can see from Trump's 4-year administration to the last 3.5 years and what has taken place in the world since then. And we as Christians must do all we can to think well through this election season. If you enjoy the podcast, please, I haven't asked for this in a while because sometimes I forget, please leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app. That really helps get the podcast into the earbuds of others. This podcast is not funded. We don't have sponsors. I just do this. And so please, that's like the best way to help this podcast to keep rolling. And I greatly appreciate it and do read every one of the reviews. Also, get this. I have a special announcement about a big thing that you're going to want to hear and you're going to love, and it's coming next month. The announcement is coming next month. I am so excited about it, and I'm working hard behind the scenes to get ready for this November announcement and a December launch. Okay. So next month, you're going to hear about it. In December, you're going to get to participate in it. I will announce it in my November newsletter first next month. So make sure that you subscribe at shandafulbright.com so you don't miss next month's newsletter, which is a worldview in 3 minutes. I already love it. And I've already written one of those newsletter articles, but you're going to get another one next month. If you have any questions for me, email me at hello@shandafulbright.com and I'll catch you on the next one.